Okay, so a video from the car today. So there's a lot of noise right now about the Online Safety Act. It's undeniable. It's everywhere. Most people have heard of it. Very few people have actually stopped to think about what it actually means for those that use and depend on the internet for their day-to-day living. On the surface, it all sounds very sensible. It all sounds very reasonable. I mean, who doesn't want to protect children? Who doesn't want to reduce or eliminate online abuse? Who doesn't want to make the internet safer? That's how it's being sold. It's how it's being peddled. But laws don't exist in isolation. They never have. They only make sense when you look at what they actually connect to. And to be honest, when you zoom out, when you look a little bit further outside the box that is the Online Safety Act, it doesn't look like a safety measure at all. It looks like part of a much wider system that many people, I believe, are absolutely oblivious to. One that is slowly changing how speech, how identity, and scarily how control work in our everyday lives. Not necessarily dramatic, not necessarily overnight, but definitely permanent. So, for most of the internet's existence, there's been one awkward problem for governments, and that is anonymity. Anonymous public spaces are generally quite messy, they're near impossible to regulate, therefore very hard to control, therefore also very hard to enforce any rules into. Now, that's not a moral judgment, it's just a practical observation. If you don't know who someone is, you can't cleanly punish them. You can't easily find them, you can't easily silence them without affecting everyone else in one fell swoop. And that's the problem that the Online Safety Act quietly solves. Because once platforms become legally responsible for what users say, anonymity stops and it stops being a feature. It becomes, in actual fact, a liability. The law doesn't say you must identify yourself to speak because it doesn't need to. All it has to do is to shift the risk, and therefore, with it, public opinion, and therefore, with it, new legislation comes in. If a platform faces massive fines for what users post, and we've seen this very recently, that platform will do what any company does. It tries to reduce its risk. It tries to mitigate exposure to these fines because that's shareholder profits, that's CEO wages. That's longevity of their company. And that means age verification. That means identity checks. It means friction in, getting into an account or opening an account. It means limits that get imposed. It means removal of access for some people. Now, it's not because somebody demanded it, simply because it's deemed to be safer. And that's how modern control works, not through bans, but through incentives. And this is where people miss the bigger picture. They really do. The Online Safety Act, it only works properly when it's paired with identity, because enforcement without identity is considered weak. But enforcement with identity is obviously very efficient. It's a coverall. So once identity becomes useful, it doesn't stay optional for very long. And we're also seeing this right now. And that's how digital ID enters this very same conversation. So you can see now how the two, the Online Safety Act and digital ID, are connected. Now, again, nobody says we're forcing digital ID on you because that would be massively unpopular. That's not how it's being framed. Instead, it's being sold as convenience, ease of access, safety, and, a type of universal verification that will make our lives better. You don't have to use it, of course you don't, but it makes things easier. And that's how it's being sold for now. Until one day, not using it actively makes things harder. And this isn't a new way of doing things. This is how systems are brought in and how they evolve. It's happened time and time again. They layer in new ways of doing things into a base system. We've already seen senior politicians openly criticize platforms like X and its owner Elon Musk. We've seen public clashes recently with Musk and Trump, with Musk and Starmer. We've seen discussions about regulation, about compliance, about responsibility, about where it ends and where it begins, and with it, a whole load of misinformation. Now, more and more recently, we've seen pressure applied, often very indirectly, through laws rather than through outright bans. And that's the key difference. Governments don't need to shut platforms down anymore. They really don't. They just need to make them legally risky. And that's literally what they're trying to do now with Ofcom. And that is an NGO. It's a quango. It's a government organisation that does what the government bids, but acts as if it's a private entity with an interest in protecting the people. It's not. It's a government company. Once risk outweighs value, platforms either have to comply or they have to retreat and surrender. This isn't censorship in the old sense, not in the traditional sense. It's something much darker. It's basically censorship by compliance. Now, when people hear this, the immediate reaction is going to be, oh, this sounds like paranoia. This sounds like tinfoil hat. Wake up. Seriously, wake up. Nothing here is going to require clandestine meetings in Whitehall. It's not going to require shadowy government plots. It's just systems built around laws that are quite frankly very easy to bring in and legislation that can be crept in by stealth. It's just systems doing what systems do. Law creates incentives. Incentives have the capacity to change behavior, and through it, behavior can reshape the way people work. It can reshape culture. And that's it. So now you look at the political context in all of this. Trust in institutions right now is at an all-time low. Polling is volatile. Labour are literally on the balls of their arse right now in terms of even staying in power, let alone getting another election. Public anger is at a maximum high, and it's been that way for some months now. And when governments lose narrative control, they don't usually try to win trust back. They try to manage risk. That's what we're seeing right now. That's why speech regulation is being accelerated during what is a period of political instability for the Labour Party. And it's not necessarily because Keir Starmer even hates free speech, although we seem to hear that quite a lot, but it's because the unpredictability of free speech is actually worrying for them. It has been reported that X is the widest used news source among 20 to 40-year-olds. That's a massive contingent of the voting population. People are using X instead of mainstream media, where government can and do control the narrative. They have people that obviously lobby for them, that do them favors, that can accelerate certain stories or print them in a certain way or just omit them altogether. X doesn't do that. X is literally raw news. And this is where Keir Starmer enters the picture. You don't have to like or dislike him to see the pattern here. This isn't about personality. I'm not even sure that he's got one. It's actually about approach. It's about centralization. It's about risk management. It's about process and design over chaos. And from that mindset, tighter digital regulation doesn't seem extreme. It just seems logical. The problem is that logic doesn't care about the consequences further down the line, further downstream. Once speech is being regulated through platforms, then the platforms are regulated through law, and the law relies on identity. So you no longer have a free public square. You've got a managed one, which doesn't make it very free. And this is where it starts to touch ordinary people like you and me. We're not activists, we're not journalists, not even influencers, just regular people. People who don't want to argue, people who don't need the hassle, people who don't want any trouble. They just want to get on with their lives. People who just want to do what they do and have the freedom to make their own choices, and through that, their own mistakes that they can learn from. Now, what happens when speaking becomes risky? Most people don't rebel. They just withdraw. They stop commenting. They stop questioning. They stop sharing. They stop posting because they're worried that the next thing they put out there or the next thing that they say could land them in a lawsuit or even worse, in a prison cell. And it's not because they've changed their views. It's because silence feels safer than the alternative. And that's a real shift in culture. Freedom doesn't disappear when speech is banned. It disappears when speech feels risky, when it feels like it could inconvenience your life. And people will think to themselves, is this true? Is what I'm hearing true? Is it real news? How will what I'm posting look later? Is this something that could come back to bite me in 2 months, 3 months, 5 years' time? Is it worth it, or is it easier just to stay quiet? And that calculation that people are going to make, that's the mechanism of control. And this is why the Online Safety Act really matters. Not because of what it says, but because of the doors it opens, because of what it enables. It's not the end point. It's basically the infrastructure that it's going to put in place for something else to come along and be built into. Now, people often say, and you will find people saying this in the comments, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. But that misses the point entirely. Privacy isn't about hiding wrongdoing, not for 99 point whatever percent of people out there. It's about having the space to think. It's about having the ability to question if you want to. And most importantly, the ability to speak without consequence. Now, once that space disappears, society changes. Really, the most important thing to understand about all of this is that you never lose freedom all at once, because there would be rebellion. You lose it through increment. You lose it through small pieces of convenience that are brought in, one policy at a time, one piece of software at a time, and it erodes. And it's through systems like this that make compliance seem more appealing and the easier option than resistance. Through laws that sound reasonable in isolation rather than one big coverall that people would just rebel against. So the Online Safety Act, it doesn't remove your voice. It changes the conditions under which you're going to want to use it. Once those conditions change, your behavioural change will follow. And we've seen it time and time again. So if this feels like something distant or something abstract or something, well, that will never happen, that's meant to feel like that. That's by design. That's because they've done their job well. They're doing it properly. They're gaslighting us in the right way. And, by the time it feels obvious, all of it's already been normalized. It'll just be all that we know. And at that point, it's too late to return. So I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not telling you what to support or who to vote for. I've got no interest in any of that. I'm just saying this. None of this is happening on its own. Once systems lock together, they never unlock. And that's it. Once this comes into place, it's here to stay. And it's going to bring digital ID with it. Mark my words. This is the lever, the Online Safety Act, which is going to bring in digital ID. So if you think this doesn't affect you, to be honest, you're wrong. It probably already does, and you just don't realise it yet. But look, as always, I am interested to hear your views and opinions on this. It's not all about me. Drop it in the comments below. Let me know what you think. YouTube is going to pop another video there. Like, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz. Probably another video very soon. Goldman, peace out.